Pope Leo XIV just broke some of the Vatican's most visible traditions, and he did it during his very first Mass. While Pope Francis made headlines for reshaping the Church's priorities, Leo's approach is more immediate, more structural, and more public. From the very first gestures, it was clear. Pope Leo wasn't just honoring the past, he was preparing the Church for something different. But what exactly changed during that first Mass? For over a millennium, Latin has been the traditional language of the Catholic Church, serving as an anchor of unity and sacred tradition for centuries across the globe. Italian, given the Vatican's location in Rome, is often used in practice, especially for local audiences. But at his very first Mass, Pope Leo XIV chose neither. Instead, he delivered his opening homily in English. The decision stood out immediately. English has never been the default language of the Holy See. No modern pope has opened his papacy with it. Yet Leo XIV, American by birth, though he has not lived in the United States for decades, opted for the language spoken or understood by billions worldwide. His use of English was not merely a personal preference, it was a strategic, symbolic choice. The message was clear. His papacy aims to communicate across borders, cultures, and continents. He later transitioned into fluent Italian, meeting expectations within the Vatican while showing respect for tradition. Still, the choice to begin in English marked a shift in tone as well as emphasis. From his first words at the altar, Pope Leo signaled that his leadership would speak to the entire world, not just to Rome. Pope Leo XIV's second bold move wasn't spoken, it was spatial. During papal masses held in the Sistine Chapel, it is tradition for the Pope to use the Grand Altar, the one positioned beneath Michelangelo's towering fresco of the Last Judgment. This altar faces the apse, turning the Pope away from the congregation and the cardinals behind him. For centuries, this orientation has been rich in symbolism. The celebrant leads the faithful in prayer by facing the same direction they do, toward God, rather than addressing the people directly. It emphasizes continuity, humility, and the notion of the Pope as a servant guiding the flock alongside them, not above them. Yet, this tradition has also sparked debate in recent decades. Critics argue that it can feel distant or exclusionary, while supporters view it as a powerful gesture of reverence. Pope Benedict XVI occasionally celebrated Mass ad orientem, facing the altar with the people, but this was typically seen as a return to older liturgical norms rather than a reform. Pope Francis, in contrast, has consistently used the versus populum, that is, facing the people orientation, favoring clarity, accessibility, and connection with the faithful. At his first Mass, Pope Leo XIV made a striking choice. He declined the Grand Altar altogether, instead using a smaller one positioned to face the cardinals directly. In doing so, he changed more than his physical stance. He altered the dynamic of the moment. The Mass became less of a proclamation and more of a conversation. By standing eye to eye with the very cardinals who had elected him, Leo cast himself not as a distant figurehead, but as an equal partner in responsibility. The shift suggested a leader who intends to work with, not merely speak to, his church. This kind of altar arrangement is not without precedent. Pope Francis himself has occasionally used smaller altars in less formal settings, but it remains rare for a first Mass, particularly one as symbolically charged as the papal debut in the Sistine Chapel. The decision was noted immediately by Vatican analysts and liturgical scholars alike. It was, in essence, a visual mission statement, that this papacy would be defined not by elevation, but by proximity, not by hierarchy alone, but by shared purpose. So, what gave these early choices even more weight? The answer lies in who Leo is and where he comes from. The papacy, which has existed for nearly 2,000 years, has been overwhelmingly European in its leadership. Of the 266 popes before Leo, all but a handful were born in Europe, over 200 of them being Italian. Only in recent years has that trend begun to shift. In 2013, Pope Francis, an Argentine of Italian descent, became the first pope from South America, signaling a growing recognition of the Church's global reach. Even so, the election of an American-born pope remained unprecedented until now. Pope Leo XIV, born Robert Francis Prevost in Chicago in 1955, marks the first time the papacy has been held by someone from the United States. Though he hasn't lived in the US for decades, his background reflects an international life in service to the Church. He lived for many years in Peru, held leadership positions across Latin America, serving extensively within the Vatican. Fluent in English, Spanish, Italian, Latin, and German, he brings a rare linguistic and cultural versatility to the role. This global awareness was mirrored in the crowd that gathered in St. Peter's Square for his first appearance. Over 100,000 people filled the plaza, representing every corner of the Catholic world. Pilgrims from Africa, Latin America, Asia, and Eastern Europe stood together with anticipation and hope. For many, Pope Leo symbolizes a church that is beginning to look more like its global membership. Background and symbolism matter, but so do actions. Leo wasted no time putting his leadership into motion. Unlike many of his predecessors, Leo grew up in a society where Catholicism was one of many religious traditions, not the default. That experience, navigating a pluralistic, often secular culture, could shape how he approaches interfaith dialogue, social issues, and internal reform. It also gives him insight into how the Church can remain present as well as persuasive in places where it must earn its influence, not assume it. But Pope Leo XIV hasn't limited himself to rituals. Tradition says the new Pope's first week is filled with ceremony. Yet just hours after his first Mass, he began moving forward with an ambitious schedule. He is slated to lead prayers at the Basilica, hold a live audience with international media, and prepare for his official inauguration Mass in St. Peter's Square, expected to draw hundreds of thousands. What's striking isn't just the schedule, but the tone he's setting. Vatican officials noted that Leo XIV insisted on meeting with press early, a move many saw as a gesture of transparency. He also requested that his homily be published in multiple languages within hours, a small but impactful step towards accessibility. Throughout his early days as Pope, he has emphasized one core idea, that the Church must stay rooted in its values while remaining present in the lives of modern people. The contrast with previous papacies is subtle but meaningful. Where past leaders may have relied more on formality or ritual, Leo XIV seems to prioritize presence along with clarity. Yet he has not disrespected tradition. So, what kind of future is this Pope really shaping? How far will he go? What happens next? Pope Leo XIV's early steps suggest a leadership style focused on balance, respecting tradition while making space for change. He hasn't thrown out the old rulebook, but he's not bound to it either. Instead, he's selecting what speaks to the moment, as well as what can be gently set aside. His actions so far suggest a focus on listening, communicating clearly, and making the Church more accessible, especially to younger Catholics, lapsed members, and those who feel alienated. By choosing to start his papacy in English, by facing his peers instead of turning his back, by stepping into the role not just as a symbol, but as a servant, he is setting a pace for what could be a transformative era. Whether you're a lifelong Catholic or someone watching from the sidelines, this moment invites you to take notice. Because when a pope speaks in a language you understand, faces you directly, and asks you to walk with him, you just might say yes.